Welcome, everybody, to the Haunted Hacker podcast number. I don't know. Duncan, what number should it be?
Shit, man, you got me. Threw me off guard there. Let's go with 87.
87, podcast number 87. Sweet.
There you go.
Cool. So tonight we have Duncan, the man, the myth, the legend. And I'll let him introduce himself here in a minute. A little bit of news for TechStrong and for the group. Went and did a talk in Dallas this week for TechStrong and Innotech. And it looks like I'll be doing the anniversary show, the 1-year anniversary show down in Boca Raton in the TechStrong studio, which would be really cool. And then next year going on the road show with Alan Schimmel to NFL cities near you all year next year. So some really cool developments. Other than that, no big news from this corner. So I'll go ahead and get started. So tonight I was lucky enough to get a hold of Duncan. He has some really big accomplishments and one of my favorite people on LinkedIn for sure. And also part of the top 1% of LinkedIn influencers, which I don't know how you get there, but that's a pretty big accomplishment. And also we have the ghost in the house from the Haunted Hacker and a special observer who I'll mention a little bit later during the show. So Duncan, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, man. So I'm Duncan Macklin. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Operandus, where we work with the cybersecurity industry's top vendors and some of the upcoming startups on helping them to better communicate and understand their audiences. And we do that with, some compelling technical marketing content and some competitive intelligence and analysis. But I started this after spending 20 plus years as a consultant to the Fortune 500 Global 2000s on enterprise management and security, and really, building a reputation and a brand around those. And as my career progressed and, some things happened with, the mergers and acquisitions of different companies, I decided I wanted to start my own and go out. So that's what I've been doing for the past 4 years, and just really a big supporter of the InfoSec community at large, and helping to support our grassroots efforts, things like B-sides conferences, our local Houston and greater Texas events, whatnot. But just a huge supporter of the community and what we bring together, what we do to help strengthen one another, and really go after this fight together, because we are all in this thing trying to accomplish the same goal, and that's to protect and defend our organizations, right? So that's who I am, what I'm about. Anything else, just ask, man. I'm an open book.
Very cool. Very cool. So I spent most of my teenage and early adult years in Houston myself.
Did you?
Yeah, I did actually. I was actually Robert Arnold from Channel 2 News in Houston actually did my story back in 2016 when I left the hacktivism realms. So I'm really familiar with that group down there. They have another group called HaHa, the Houston Area Hackers Anonymous, really good group. Yeah, so I'm really familiar with those guys.
Kind of spun off from the Austins.
Yeah. Yep. And those guys are really good too. The looking at Robert Hansen and HD Moore and those guys when they spun up that in Austin, really great group. And the one in Austin has a really cool way that they allow people to come to the group. So you have to present, and whether it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever, you have to do something. Which I think is really cool. It gets people out of the show and gets people involved and actually active. Also takes away some.
I agree to an extent, but we also have to take into account that some of our community members suffer from anxiety and
Yes.
they're not comfortable in that situation, but they still want to participate. They want to be there and to learn from others. So that's why I kind of like the approach that we have in Houston. It's encouraged, but it's not a requirement. We don't
Right.
pressure people to do it. And honestly, as much as I like AHA, that's the one thing that I do criticize them is, when you put that expectation and you force it,
Right.
that's that's just putting in a level of anxiety and stress on someone that they may not be willing to take on. And you may be losing that person
Yeah.
as a valued member as a result.
Yeah. So I had the same anxiety and deal with neurodiversity and stuff like that. So when they told me that I was going to be speaking at a conference, I was terrified. I'd never spoken in front of people before.
Yeah.
And it really, I mean, it had a physical effect on me.
Hmm.
But I learned ways to cope with it and to get around it. Looking at isolating myself before the talk and stuff like that. But it's difficult. Like you said, it's difficult to get in front of people.
It
Um,
is.
but it's given me a way to learn how to communicate and learn how to socialize, which I didn't have those skills like I do now. And I was kind of thrown into it, but I really enjoyed the trip as far as, being able to get out there and actually connect with people. I think that's super important. Um, so as far as like conferences and stuff go, what kind of stuff do you enjoy doing as far as conferences? Do you like doing the whole DEF CON thing or the smaller like B-sides and Sky Talks and stuff like that?
Truth be told, I've never been to DEF CON.
No.
No. There's just been one cause or reason after another, year
Mm,
after year, that I've not been able to attend in person. So the virtual DEF CON experiences that we've been able to have these past couple of years, that's been fantastic. So I've been
mm,
able to gain some of that experience. But um, for myself, I do like the intimacy of the smaller B-sides type events. Houston SecCon is another
mm,
one. But with the B-sides events, you get just such an intimate experience with the attendees, with the speakers, a lot more face-to-face, one-on-one time to be able to engage. I love being able to present and share my experience with others and being able to have the time to do some of the one-on-ones afterwards and find a little cubby hole and sit down and talk and go through things. I think that's a lot more capable when you're dealing with some of these more grassroots effort conferences versus the larger, where there's thousands of attendees and hundreds of attendees sitting in your talks, if not thousands. It just it doesn't scale for that intimacy
right.
in my perspective.
Totally agree.
Now, of
Totally
course,
agree.
I'm saying that having never been to DEF CON, but
Mm,
I have spearheaded a conference that ended up turning into the Microsoft Management Summit with
mm,
thousands in attendance. So I'm no stranger to that, or Microsoft Ignite with 30,000 people in attendance. I get those types of events, and as much as we need those, and they are critical to our industry and to our survival, there's just different levels of experience. And I think we can take, I guess, pick and choose the bits that work best for us from each of those.
Yeah, I really enjoy like the different types of conferences. So I've
Hmm.
done, conferences with law enforcement. I've done, academia type stuff. But I think what I enjoy the most is people who are just interested in security, not so much as, want to go to the big, label, whether it be Black Hat or whatever. And I think that's kind of why we spun up this group, the Haunted Hackers. Got tired of looking at all the other groups and just wanted to spin something up from the ground, something pure and something real. And we kind of keep the podcast like that too. One of my first concerns when we started was what can I say and what can I say? But what was cool is that TechStrong, gave me creative freedom and was able to we could just be us, And so kind of like documenting the history of cybersecurity and all the players that were involved is really important to me, because I think that the longer we go and the more that cybersecurity evolves as an industry, I kind of feel like we're losing touch with some of where it started from. And to me, that's super important to be able to, record that and share that with people coming in. Because, being in the industry, I think this is like my 24th or 25th year. Yeah, I've seen it change a lot, some for the good and some for the absolute horrible. So, what is your take on the environment right now? Like looking back in the days of when this first started get going and, when we were still playing with BBSs and stuff like that, and then where it's come to now.
It's interesting that you say playing with BBSs, because I was one of the largest BBSs in the state of Tennessee back during the early 90s,
Mhm.
running a Wildcat system with a couple of robo boards, had 4 incoming lines,
Nice.
FidoNet.
Hmm.
So we essentially had internet email back in 1992, 93.
Hmm.
And, looking at the natural progression and transformation of this industry and where we've come from and where we're at today, looking at it from a pure security perspective, if you look at where we were, let's just say at the Y2K,
Hmm.
right? So year 2000,
I remember that night.
after the panic attacks, you know, then we started seeing SQL Slammer, all the other, Melissa variants, all this
Netski.
stuff, and then what ended up coming out of all of that was the Trustworthy Computing Initiative, right? From Bill Gates, and him sending that memorandum that basically called a shutdown to any new coding. It was a 6-month halt, code review of everything, from the Windows operating system to SQL Server, Exchange, the whole product line, right? Complete halt in any new coding, just a code review, and really getting into secure by design, right? And that started this whole paradigm shift in how we approach things. And then, of course, came Patch Tuesday out of that, right? So now we're starting to get more proactive in having a maintenance release cycle that could be predicted, uh, and resources assigned, and knowing how we're going to approach cybersecurity within our organizations. And then other industry big players like Oracle and Adobe and others started latching on to Patch Tuesday, and they were updating their products, whether if it was every month or every quarter, but on that Tuesday, second Tuesday of the month. And we all started to get in line with expectations. However, corporations were still very slow to adopt the patching release cycles. And we still are to this day. Some 20 years later, we're still very slow to do what we know we need to be doing, because we're so fearful of X, Y, or Z, you know, not working properly with our legacy applications. Well, get the fuck over it. Look at
Hmm.
what the real risk factor is here, folks. Do your pros and cons and your risk analysis, but we've got to do a better job with this stuff. But if I were to have to say where we're at today versus where we were 20 years ago, yeah, leaps and bounds. We have secure software development life cycles. We have, agile, that's including, the security reviews and all that stuff. But when it comes to just some of the basic elements, how many organizations out there, if we were to take a poll right now, are actually actively patching their third party products in the same release cycle as they are their Microsoft products every month? I guarantee you it's going to be slim.
Very, very
Right.
slim.
So I'll ask you, what do you think we need to be doing to better improve our security posture as a whole? And do you think we're really any better off today than we were 20 years ago?
To be honest with you, I think we're at the same spot we were at 20 years ago. We still have the same variants that, if you throw up a honeypot and watch the traffic, you still see SQL Slammer floating around the internet. You still see Blaster. We haven't gotten any better at protection, and we haven't gotten any better at cybersecurity awareness, making people, educating people. And I think that's a big part of our failure is the education piece of it. Because for so long, when we had started the industry, it was like the people who had the knowledge hoarded it because it was kind of like job security, or position, or reputation security. And we're starting to see a little bit of that change. But in general, I still think that we are failing at keeping people educated, and not just people in the industry, but this is a global problem now. Before, it was a business problem, right? And now that we've made technology so available to everybody, it's become a global initiative. But we haven't gotten to the citizen and the people level yet. And I think that's a huge failure. I think that, as long as we focus on just the industry and protecting companies and protecting money, we're failing. Now, when we start protecting people as a community, that's when we'll see a change, I think. But I think we're pretty far off. I did a post on LinkedIn this past week. I actually did two posts. I did one that was technical, and I did one that was people oriented. And what I found, and this is my theory, is that as an industry, we're tired of seeing ones and zeros. We're tired of seeing the failures. We're tired of seeing technology based communication. Um, and the reason why I say that is because I did a technical post. It got like 2,000 views, right? I did a post about me and my first pen testing boss and our friendship and how it lasted, 20 years. 16,000 views. To me, that tells me that people want to hear stories about people, not just about technology. And I think if we reach out to more people like that, I think things will change a little bit.
I agree. And, you know, security at the individual level
Hmm.
tends to only matter after they
After the fact.
become a victim, and we've got to do something to change that expectation and to make security something that does matter to the masses before they become victims of things like ransomware or identity theft or having patient health information sacrificed because they didn't properly dispose of a prescription bottle or what have you. There's all kinds of ways the the individual, that the general, Joe Blow out there, um, can become the victim of some type of cyber attack.
Mhm.
And I think it's our responsibility as security practitioners to help carry the message out into the community and to make them more educated about safe havens and ways to protect themselves and their data. uh, I bear that burden of responsibility myself, and I think there's things that we can do to help. Whether if it's through like LinkedIn, just putting stuff out there that isn't necessarily industry related, but just helpful to the average person. Every one of my LinkedIn posts is available to anybody.
I
It's not
didn't.
just my connections, right? Because what I put out there, I don't put anything on LinkedIn unless I intend for everybody in the world to be able to see it, right? It's out there. So, there's that expectation of zero privacy.
Yep.
Uh, so anybody can see it, and I put stuff out there that I hope the average consumer or individual will see
Hmm.
and think about, in their day-to-day lives. uh, but I think there's more that we can do as an industry, and I think if, let's just say, every b-sides organization around the world, in between their annual events, took on the mission of educating their local community, going into their libraries and holding, cybersecurity, ask us anythings, or, do little mini trainings on ways that, community members can protect their laptops, or, connect their Wi-Fi and, securely configure it, those kinds of things. If we took on that mission in between our annual events, can you imagine the impact that would have on the global cybersecurity?
Oh, for sure, for sure, a huge impact. And one of the things that I try to do, one of the posts I did this week was about Amazon's new line of Alexa and Alexa type products.
And the
Um,
robot.
yeah, the robot. Because to me, people need to know about that stuff. And do you want those eyes in your house? Do you want that type of surveillance going on internally? And so I try to educate people on that, and I post videos of hacking Android phones and stuff like that. So that, because a lot of the stuff that we do, people look at it and they see it on TV, but they think it's only in the movies and they don't think it's real. But then when you show it to them, right there in their face, it's like,
Yeah.
oh shit, this is real. I'm like, yeah, like there's a whole nother world past what you see. And I
Let
think
me
it's the
show you what I can do with this little watch that I have on my wrist. Let me
right.
D off all of these devices, and Rickroll you.
Yep.
Uh, and that goes into it. Just simple things like, should these IoT devices be existing on the same home network that your data driven devices are sitting on, or should they be segmented? That little guest network that shows up on your Wi-Fi router, it's there for a reason, folks. Maybe
Yep.
you need to segment, take all your IoT devices, toss it over to that network, keep your data devices like your laptops and your, Plex servers or what else, and keep that over here, where the two don't touch. So if something does happen, if there is some botnet, for example, that decides to pwn all of your Alexa devices and wreak havoc against the world, you're not going to be compromising your data in the process. And I
Right.
think we need to just help folks understand these things.
And we need to do it for the better of the internet as well, because the more of these IoT devices that come out, and I think I can't remember how many billions they're estimating by the end of 2022, but the more of these devices that get deployed on the internet in people's homes, they're creating a bigger attack surface, as well as creating a bigger target environment for people to take over and use those IoT devices against companies or governments, with denial of service or different types of attacks. Because the least amount of security is always put into the consumer products. And I mean, that's
Right.
just across the board, cameras, everything, Alexa. And I think we saw with Mariah Botnet that, those things that we have at home really are not that safe. They don't, companies don't make those products with security in mind. They make them with convenience and price tags. That's it.
Yeah. The one thing that I will say has improved immensely as far as IoT is
Mhm.
default passwords. All right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
if we look back, even as recent as 2 or 3 years ago,
Hmm.
these IoT devices were being shipped out from the manufacturers, all rubber stamped with the same username and password, admin password. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And today, I think post Mirai and a lot of the other type of botnets, we've come to understand that's a huge security risk. And
Mhm.
for the most part, all these IoT device manufacturers have gotten on board with unique username and password combinations as these devices are being, shipped out from the manufacturers. So thank God we at least have that. But we also need, to just keep the average consumer aware of these types of things so that they do look at that when they are buying anything they're connected to their network. They are making sure that there is some type of unique username and password, even if they're having to manufacture or not manufacture, but come up with that themselves to help defend against these types of internet-borne attacks. So
Totally.
I will give the industry some credit in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, the manufacturers are getting a little bit better. I know after the big compromise of Mirai botnet, they started making the passwords where you have to create a password before you can even go into the setup, which I think is really good. Comcast was interesting. So I was doing some work on research on Comcast devices, and they had a hidden tech credentials in their routers. I won't leak it on air, but it was a Comcast tech profile, and it was on every business router. So you could basically use the same credentials on every business router that had Comcast. And I, did a thing on Channel 2 when they did my story. I showed them how easy it is to disable their alarm system and video cameras with just MDK3 and shut everything down. So I mean, there's some things that are getting better and some things that aren't. But I think in all, like, people are starting to see that these devices are used for other purposes. And that's part of what I talked about in my talk in Dallas. Was I was talking about IoT and I was talking about different devices, vulnerabilities and whatnot. And I had a guy ask me, he says, what kind of router should I get? And I said, well, it depends. There's several different features in different routers,
Yeah,
but
right.
what I would suggest is once you pick your router, go on to the CVE list and look and see if there's a CVE for that router, and what you need to do to lock it down before you even buy it. Know what you're buying and not just buy blindly, because I think a lot of people, it's just like the cybersecurity industry. When there's a new platform out, shiny, it's new, it's everybody wants it, they just run out and get it. AI, for instance.
Yeah.
And you look at consumers, they're no different. They see it on the internet, they see it on TV and the commercials, are like, oh, gotta have one. So before even buying it, they're stepping into a trap, because I'm sure that there's vulnerabilities already released about the firmware before it even hits the shelves.
Yeah,
Um,
and that's a really smart point because if you ask folks if they look at Amazon reviews before making a purchase, or Best Buy, do they look at their reviews? Of course, we're gonna take a look and see what others are saying about the product. Why wouldn't we do the same thing to make sure that we're getting a secure product, or at least we know what to patch as soon as we
right.
get it, you know, in our hands? So yeah, that's a very smart recommendation.
Yeah, so Cyber Awareness Month kicked off, I guess, yesterday. So I'm
Mm,
giving
yeah.
one talk for the London Police, I think on Wednesday, and then one for the British Computing Society, and then a couple others for like CPAs, and then one for ICE. So this month is like really heavy for awareness, and I think that people need to educate themselves as well. Like, be able to know what the CVE list actually is. Um,
Hmm.
because I guarantee you, if you ask any consumer, do you know where to find vulnerabilities about your device? No clue.
Nope.
So that's one of the things I'm trying to push, is people to enable themselves and actually, like, educate themselves and know where to go. I think that's really
Exactly.
important.
Yeah.
Also, I think that, with Cybersecurity Awareness Month, like mental health and stuff like that also kicks off this month, um, which I think in our industry is like super important, because with all of the stuff that we do and all the things we're involved in, um, we have little time for ourselves. And I've seen myself burn the candle at both ends and like really stress myself out, and giving, but not taking a chance to, break off and have time for myself. So how do you balance all the things that you do with Operandus and everything else, and have time for yourself?
Uh, I'm really poor at it.
Yeah.
to tell you the truth. Um, I'm trying to get much better because my health is becoming more and more of a focus over these past few years.
Mm-hmm.
But, I'm like you, I tend to burn the candle at both ends and in between.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I'm trying to structure my days where I have break points throughout the day that I assign time for myself to start my day properly with a defined routine that I manage, not everybody else who's coming at me.
Mm-hmm.
I plan breaks during the day, and then I take time also for education, during my week. So I keep myself fresh, but I keep myself motivated. I keep myself rested, and just I'm actually using some of the new features of M365. Microsoft started very recently this Viva, where it will schedule time on your calendar for these kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually have time blocked out, at the beginning of my day. I have 15-minute breaks built into my day. I have a 2 hours dedicated per week, to education. So I try to use the technology to help me get away from the technology, so to
Right.
speak. But it's what's working for me, and um trying to pay more attention to both my physical and mental health,
Mm-hmm.
because those are critical things for us. And as well as I do what the burn rate is in our industry. And it's because of things like this. We tend to go 24/7 because there isn't any rest to the workload. We can sit there and work as long as we want to because the work will continue to exist.
Oh yeah.
And unless we take time away and
Mm-hmm.
step away forcefully, we can just keep getting sucked right back into that vacuum. And it's gets harder and harder to push away the longer you stay in there because you just get so weakened down by it all.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And especially when the pandemic hit, the lockdown gave me a chance to start some research that I wanted to do, but it also created this environment where I never really stopped working until I fell asleep. And I think that that wears on you after a while. I got really sick. Um, so one of the things that I do now is, when I wake up in the morning, I try to get into like a mindfulness type mood where, I set myself and I put myself in the present, and I try to stay that way, as much as I can through the day. Because I can get wrapped up in that whole hamster wheel of, oh, this is tomorrow, and I got to do this, I got to do that, I got to do this, and things start piling on. Before I know it, like I'm just completely a
Just
mess.
spinning your wheels.
Yeah. So
Exactly.
I think it's super important, and getting out like in nature and stuff, getting away from technology every once in a while and just like breathing, I think is super important because the way I coin it is the people in the industry that, get out there the most and do the most, they're kind of like shooting stars, right? They burn really, really bright, but they also burn really, really quick and then they go out. I mean, I've seen a lot of my friends that have passed away in the past year or two, either from health issues or from mental health issues, and ended their lives. But they burn really quick and then they're gone. And I don't want to be one of those numbers, and I don't want anybody else to have to go through that. So I try to stay on some sort of regimen of, taking a break every so often, like you said. I think that's really important.
Agreed. Absolutely.
So you
I
have this,
wish there were more opportunities to take
yeah,
longer
yeah,
breaks.
absolutely. See, we were talking a while back, and I knew that you had been from San Antonio, and now you're in Houston, and you're doing some RV living now.
Yeah.
Which, dude, that is so fascinating to me. So me and my roommate Nomad, he's on right now. We're looking at those types of setups with like sprinters, or with RVs. Tell me about your setup, man. I'm really interested to know what it's like.
Okay. So this started 3 years ago.
Hmm.
Uh, my wife and I, who she's on here as well, but um, we spent about 6 months researching this stuff
Mm-hmm.
and watched hundreds of hours of YouTube videos with,
Mm-hmm.
reviews of different RVs and just what the whole RV life, hashtag RV life
Yeah.
was all about. And, getting into different couples who were out there living this lifestyle and following their YouTube channels and everything else. And we decided, you know what, screw it, let's do it. So we sold off, pretty much everything we had, became very much minimalist and, getting down to bare essentials. And then we bought a 30-foot RV, right? A bumper pull. So one of the ones that you pull behind a pickup truck,
Mm-hmm.
which we already had. So today I'm sitting here at my, 60-inch desk. I have 3 curved monitors. I'm looking out my window, nice Texas skies and trees and whatnot. But this is my lifestyle. We unfortunately, when we started this, it was early on days of Operandus, and I had a different business model than what we are today. Our customers in the market kind of defined what I do and what Operandus is all about. But we started off a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
And the plan was ultimately for us to travel around the country and really just experience what is out there. And unfortunately, um, my physical health took a turn for the worst. And I have a disability now that is really limiting me physically. I'm having very limited use of my extremities. I'm starting to get the paralysis in my hands. I have diabetic neuropathy throughout my arms and legs. Um, so for me, getting around is very difficult. Getting outside and being physical, like, in my 30s, you would find me kayaking town lake, geocaching, hiking the hill country in Texas, just being out there, being cool, sweating it off, being top physique. Not anymore. I couldn't hold an oar in my hands and paddle a canoe to save my life right now. But we're still living the RV life. So we started out, spent almost a year in New Braunfels, right along the Guadalupe River. Love that. Then we decided we wanted a little bit of a change of scenery, so we headed down to Florida, and we were in Ocala, Florida, for just about a year. And this was when COVID started just coming into the news and really hitting into the US. So I told my wife we need to get our asses back to Texas right quick, because I could tell there was going to start being some travel bans, and I
Yep.
did not want to be stuck outside the state of Texas. So we packed up, hauled ass, and got back to Texas 2 days before Governor Abbott shut down I-10 coming in from the Louisiana side, because everything was popping off in New Orleans
Mm-hmm.
with massive COVID infections. So he was trying to containerize it. So we decided we wanted a change of pace. Now, you said earlier I'm from San Antonio. I'm going to correct you. I'm actually from technically Austin, spent 10 years there, then had to come to Houston because I was a director for a startup, had to keep an eye on my children, so to speak.
Right.
So I moved to Houston to be in the office more frequently and fell in love with Midtown Houston. So I
Oh yeah.
ended up spending 10 years there.
Mm-hmm.
So when we came back, we wanted just a change of pace. And that's one of the great things about the RV lifestyle. You can just pick and choose wherever the hell you want to be and, pop in.
Mhm.
So we decided on San Antone because my wife is originally from that area. And, figure we'd just give it a shot. Well, we got to San Antone, and well, you can imagine with COVID,
Mhm.
we weren't going anywhere. So we stayed there for a year and a half. And now we decided, let's get back to Houston. That's who we are. That's where we want to be. So last month we decided to make the trek, and here we are back in Houston. But yeah, I highly recommend the RV lifestyle to anybody that has the interest. Even if you have kids, we see families with children RVing all the time. This resort that we're in right now, there's a swimming pool, there's a hot tub,
Mhm.
there's, dog park. We have a stocked pond sitting right out here that I can go cast a line in. It is catch and release.
Yeah.
But whatever, just find whatever it is you're looking for and pack up and go out there and seek it.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, I worked in the northwest side of Houston, over in the Katy I-10 area,
Mm.
for oil and gas. And, Houston's a nice place, but, it's so busy. And I think that part of what stressed me out in my early career was spending 2 and 3 hours on the road in traffic. And it was
Yeah.
just mind numbing. By the
See,
time I
that's
got to,
why I stayed in Midtown. I could
yeah,
walk to my office. It
yeah.
was literally 9/10 of a mile
Mm.
from my flat in Midtown to my office in the Houston Technology Center, right there at Bagby and I-10.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I was living in Clear Lake and commuting to Katy every
Oh,
day.
jeez.
So you're
That'd be
looking at,
brutal.
yeah, 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours at night. So my day was about 12 hours a day.
Mm.
So, it stresses you out. And a lot of people don't understand the more time you spend in the car. I mean, you're already working, your mind is already going. And then by the time you get to work, you need a break just to get to work.
Yeah.
So once the pandemic hit, I was like, thank God, we can all work from home, and people can relax a little bit. But what's bad is a lot of companies, when they look at the worker working from home, they figure since you're at home and you're relaxed, that they can put more stuff on your plate and make
Yeah.
the day longer. And you never really disconnect. That's the hard part.
And that's something for anybody out there that's a manager
Mm,
that has reports. Let me give you a little tidbit here, okay? Because you just hit something that's a real sticking point for me. When you start sending emails after hours, you're placing that expectation on your employees to respond after hours, and that's unacceptable to me. Get used to delayed sends. Find that feature in Outlook, find that feature in Gmail, and learn how to delay the sending of your messages to your direct reports until it's office hours. Just because you're up and working at 11 o'clock on a Saturday evening doesn't mean that your employees should be as well. So take that expectation. Don't be sending emails to them because you immediately place that expectation. And that's just a bullshit business practice. I'm sorry. You
it's
hit a nerve point
no,
here.
you're absolutely right. I mean, that's one of my pet peeves is when I get an email at like 4 a.m. or 2 a.m., from whoever. It doesn't even have to be an employer. It can be anybody. And it's like, what makes you think that I'm going to be up at 4 a.m. to take your email? And
Right.
then you expect me to call you at my biggest pet peeve is when somebody sets a meeting time for 8 a.m.
Oh, jeez.
It's
No,
like,
sir.
if you're in an office, are you really going to have a meeting at 8 a.m.? No, we're just coming into work.
And be mindful of time zones as well.
Oh,
Just because you're on the East Coast and you want to fire off at 9 o'clock in the morning,
mhm.
if you have teammates that are on the West Coast, have some consideration,
Yeah.
folks, and I'm dealing with international clients. So I have to be cognizant from Tel Aviv
Hmm.
to, Belfast to, the East Coast and the West Coast, all the way down to Australia. So,
Yep.
I'm having to be real sensitive and trying to plan ahead. And I'll even email ahead of
Mhm.
time and ask, do you mind if I set this meeting at this time because I know it's going to have this impact on you?
Yeah.
And get that approval from them beforehand, or give them the opportunity to say, no, do you mind scheduling it for a different time? And if not, use some of the technology tools available. If you're using Outlook client, it has that meeting option available, or you can use things like, I think it's dateandtime.com,
Yeah.
meeting planning.
Yeah, that's really difficult. And learning how to say no is another hard part for me. I do a lot of my speaking overseas in London, South Africa, Australia, wherever, Cyprus in like a couple weeks. And I think the hardest part for me is when they schedule it and they schedule on their time zone and it ends up being 4 a.m. for me. It's difficult because I really want to do those engagements for them because it means a lot to me. But learning how to say no is one of those things in my career that I have yet to accomplish. And, I think that plays a lot on
Yeah.
my mental health as well.
Hmm.
Because there's sometimes when I get frustrated because someone will schedule a meeting for 4 a.m. But it's partially my fault because I don't push back. I want to do what I can for people, but I sacrifice myself for it a lot. Um, and you got to find that balance, I guess. And I still haven't found that quite yet. Um,
With you there, because for me, it's, am I risking a
Potential.
business impact?
Hmm. Yep.
Am I potentially going to lose this business customer because I'm pushing back too much because of those expectations they're putting on me?
Right.
But you're right, it's a healthy balance, and it's saying no with an explanation.
Right.
It's not just being a dick and saying, no, I'm not going to do it, you know, find another time.
Hmm.
It's, no, I can't do it because XYZ,
Right.
and giving them a reasonable explanation so that they understand not only this time why it's not possible, but
Hmm.
they'll also bring that into consideration the next time something like that comes up as well.
Absolutely. And to me, health and mental health are super important. Over the past couple years, part of the reason why I'm back in the States is because I was diagnosed with epilepsy. And the medication itself takes a toll on me. It makes me really tired. And just the risk of wearing myself out and putting myself in a situation where I could potentially have another seizure. A lot of people don't take that into consideration. And I do my best to limit what I do so I don't fall back into that trap. But once you start doing something in your career and it takes off and people get involved with it, it's almost like you feel you have to do it because if you step back, you're afraid of losing that edge or afraid of losing that potential platform to speak from. And I just ran into this platform and the ability to be able to speak to people around the world just a couple of years ago. So I'm still in that. I feel like I'm struggling. I feel like I'm clawing my way to the top type deal, and I feel like if I turn something down, then I may not get another opportunity. So it's one of those things you play that in your head, and you also have to deal with like imposter syndrome and everything else that goes along with it. Um, but a lot of people don't understand that. They know what they need and they know what they want, and they don't care what goes on with you. They have immediate needs. By God, you're going to fill it. So yeah, I just other employers out there that are listening, I would highly suggest that you take those things into consideration. Even though it's a pandemic, think about the stress that the pandemic causes alone with people with families, potential of kids and spouses getting COVID and what it could do to a family. Take that in consideration and, show some kindness and give people a break every once in a while. So
Here,
tell me on your RV, I'm really interested to know about your internet connection and how you run that technology in your RV.
okay, so that depends on really where you're going to be at and what the expectation is,
Mm.
right? So if you're just really working on your own, there's not a lot of demand for high speed internet connectivity, then you can typically get away with having a 5G MiFi type device. I've
Right.
got one of those from Verizon, and as long as you're in a good reception location, then that could suffice.
Mm.
Right now, we are at a location that has AT&T fiber with Ethernet to the pedestal. Right, so
Really?
we have a pedestal that has our 50 amp hookup, our 20 amp hookup, and we have Google Fiber. So I had a friend of mine who's a contractor here in Houston come over, and he and I did the wiring because I, our RV is fitted for coax on the exterior. So all we'd have to do is hook up a coax, and we could get like Comcast
Right.
TV and internet that way. But with AT&T, we didn't have a Ethernet, right? We didn't have a Cat 5 or Cat 6E connection, so we brought one in and wired all that up. So I have basically Google Fiber right now. It's not an issue. It just depends on where you're at and what the options are and what your requirements are.
Right.
But typically, if you're just doing something like BLM, Bureau of Land
Mhm.
Management, and you're out there in the desert, maybe a 5G device, I highly doubtful. So you're probably falling back to 3G or 4G networks,
Mhm.
sat phones with
Sat phones, yeah.
a data link. But for the most part, it's just going to depend on where you're at and what your requirements are.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we battled when I first got back to the States. I moved to Alabama with my friend Nomad, and we had a hell of a time. We're on LTE at one point, and it was just the worst experience ever. Podcast, I couldn't make it through a podcast without dropping off and having to reconnect at least 2 or 3 times. It was horrible.
Yeah.
And that was my biggest concern is like, going on the road, what that would be like. And, the, if I was going to be able to host a podcast on the road,
Well,
but I think it's possible.
the other thing is, like when we were in Ocala, I was still doing Cyber Speaks Live. Actually,
Mhm.
it's kind of where it all kicked off to a certain extent. And we would go into the local library and use one of their rooms
Oh, cool.
and basically just close ourselves off from everything else that was going on inside of the library, but we had access to their high speed internet access, and we would just do the recordings there. So there's other ways that you can still take care of what you need to on a weekly basis, with podcasting and stuff, but
Right.
have otherwise limited internet access inside the RV.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I was doing the podcast from a hotel when I first got to Tennessee, and now I'm on a short-term lease in this place, and it has decent internet connection. Um, but
You're in Tennessee?
I am actually. I'm in Chattanooga right now.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
my actually my daughter's in Chattanooga this weekend.
Oh, really?
My youngest one, yeah. I have three daughters. They're
Mhm.
all in Tennessee.
Cool.
Two are in the Nashville area, one's in Knoxville, but I spent from 15 until 30 in the Nashville, Franklin area.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I came to Tennessee a couple months ago, and mostly for the doctors and stuff like that are close. Because I also have a heart issue that I have to maintain. So just it makes sense to be in a more metropolitan sort of. It's not really a big town, but it's not a little town either. It's kind of Chattanooga is a kind of a unique place
Yeah,
to be.
I've been
Um,
many times.
yeah, it's a beautiful place, and there's a lot of stuff to do. Last night I was walking down the street, just got pizza, and ran into the comedian Theo Vaughn after his set at the Tivoli. Just walking home, and there he was sitting on the corner talking to a bunch of people on the street. You just cool things like that happen a lot. Just because it's kind of a small town.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's really interesting. And man, I'm so glad that you decided to be on the show. And man, you're more than
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's been an extreme pleasure.
absolutely. And you're welcome back anytime, as a guest, or if you want to come on and help me interview somebody. Absolutely. I always invite, the previous guests to come on and anytime they want and help me interview people or, just be part of the show. Um, I know there's one guy that's kind of sitting in the shadows, and I want to introduce him before we end the podcast. And his name is Ian Murphy. Ian, are you there? Well, anyways, Ian is on, and he is going to be an integral part of my hacking and privacy advocate career. So he'll be.
Why, good afternoon.
Hey, Ian, how are you? It's good to talk to you.
Another fun day in hell.
I hear you. I hear you. Well, I wanted to introduce you to everybody and let them know that we have some things coming up. I won't dump it now. I won't tease people, but there's a lot of good things that we're going to be doing together.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, guys, that's the end of the hour and the end of the podcast. And I hope everybody has a fantastic weekend.
Hold on.
Go ahead, Duncan.
Let me back up real quick. Because,
sure.
Ian, I have a fairly good knowledge about Mr. Murphy and his background, but it is Cybersecurity Awareness Month.
That it is.
Ian has a pretty good way of helping our industry and the general public in that regard. Do you mind? I just think it would be a good opportunity for him to just give a 30-second elevator pitch about what he's doing to help with cybersecurity awareness in general.
Sure, absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks for jumping in there, Duncan. Ian, do you want to be on video or you just want to do it through audio?
Sure, let's do video.
All right, sure.
I look like hell, but what the hell?
Don't we all?
So you start the. There you go. You got to start the video.
Actually, you're a co-host, so you should be able to just pop your video on.
I'm starting video.
Okay. It shows that it's still muted. Doesn't show that it's on.
While it's playing this, let's
sure.
get something clear here.
Sure.
I've been in this industry for many, many, many years, decades. And I have seen the ignorance, the avarice, and the outright stupidity. And even when it slaps them in the face, they don't go ahead and understand it. And corporations and governments consider security to be nothing more than a loss leader until they get hit. Then they call the CIOs and the CISOs onto the carpet and go, "What the hell happened, Jim? Tell me what happened, Bill." And they respond, "Remember when we asked you for an additional $2 million for cybersecurity and you said no? Well, guess what? You lost because you wouldn't listen." And the problems that are happening today are literally exponentially increasing to a point where I think everybody should be at DEFCON 2. I have friends who had their accounts constantly hacked, and I find that it's not due to their ignorance, it's also due to the providers. And I was just told to preach, Ian. That's what I was just told. Preach, Ian. One of the things that I find most disturbing in the entire industry is that none of them realize that security is an asset. And then when they have to go ahead and provide credit monitoring services or other things to quell the savage beast in the stock market, and half of these corporations will not reveal that they have been hacked because it affects their stock. So, and if you look at the social media platforms, i.e. Facebook, for example, it is one of the largest nightmares in this country. And the Facebook files from the Wall Street Journal are an eye-opening read. And then the new book called The Ugly Truth by 2 New York Times reporters spells it out in black and white. But let's remember that at my age, which is grossly, unfortunately, 40 years above most of you, I used to sit around and watch atomic bomb above ground tests as a child. Now, I tell people I'm technically older than dirt, but I am technically older than NASA. So I have seen many, many things in my lifetime, and I have been trained by some of the finest in the industry, both military and commercial. And I've had the privilege of even being on the cover of the Wall Street Journal, People Magazine, etc. I appreciate this opportunity to speak right now. And I'm telling all of you, don't trust a damn thing out here, because zero trust is now becoming the new buzzword amongst everybody, because you can't trust anything. And no matter what your security is, these little miscreants out there, be them Russian hackers, Chinese hackers, North Korean hackers, nation states, you know, the 14-year-old sitting around going, let me try this. And he gets in, they all get their clocks cleaned. And with that, I will let you go ahead and do your thing. And I appreciate this opportunity for speaking.
I appreciate it, Ian, and I look forward to doing our work together and our projects in the future. So I look at Ian as my Obi-Wan Kenobi now. So look for some stuff from me and Ian in the future. Duncan, I really appreciate you being on again. It's really been awesome, and hopefully we can get together and do this again sometime soon. Tell everybody in Houston I said hello. All the guys at haha, and give everybody my best, and take care of yourself, man. And I hope to speak to you in the future. With that, guys.
Absolutely, you too.
I appreciate it, man.
Me too.
Absolutely. So with that, I'm gonna go ahead and close it out. You guys have a good weekend, and Haunted is out. See you guys next time.
Yes, sir.